Are you deciding to move to either the Bay Area or New York City? Maybe you live in one of them already and are thinking of moving to the other place. Hi, I'm Spencer Su, and in this series, I'm going to be doing a comparison of the Bay Area versus other cities that are often considered when top talent wants to choose a location. Because the two areas are so huge, we're going to make some generalizations by the best of each metro instead of just focusing on, let's say, San Francisco and Manhattan. But let's begin this heavyweight battle coast to coast. Is the West Coast the best coast? Now let's talk about the breakdown. Sports. What's interesting is that even though New York has a reputation for having top teams, maybe a lot of it is nostalgic. The San Francisco Giants' last World Series title came in 2014, while the Yankees, believe it or not, was in 2009. Now we're not going to mention the Mets or the A's in this example. They're always competitors, but they haven't had that kind of success. In basketball, it's a big difference. The Warriors have won 4 titles in the last 8 seasons, while the Nets and Knicks, just not so much going on. And how about football? The New York Football Giants have actually won more titles recently than the Niners, so there's a little bit of nostalgia for Niners side of things. But they're still very competitive and things are doing well. What about the soccer clubs? The New York City Football Club has won title this millennium, while the Earthquakes have won 2. So let's talk about the downtown and just transportation altogether. Now, we all know about Manhattan, and it's arguably the cultural capital of the world. They have so many great restaurants and fun places to spend a day. You can even be there for years and not even exhaust all these options that are presented to you by the city, especially when it comes to dining. Now, San Francisco has its own unique charms too. It's a little bit slower pace relative to Manhattan. Each neighborhood is so different. Go between Marina, No Valley, it's just such a different atmosphere. Lots of nice little shops. There is no shortage of delicious foods and great bars to hang out in the city. But because the sheer density of Manhattan, of just so many different things they can do because it's such a concrete jungle, I really do favor Manhattan's downtown way more than San Francisco. Now, what about transportation? The Bay has the BART and the Caltrain system, but it doesn't really hold much of a candle to New York's MTA, which does run 24/7 and can really take you almost anywhere you want to go along this intersecting of lines. Now, this system is used by hundreds of millions of passengers each year, so I'm gonna have to say New York is just a lot more convenient, but it's also a lot more painful if you're actually trying to drive in and out of Manhattan during that time, which is not as bad for San Francisco. Now, if you enjoy driving though, fortunately because of the Bay Area with a lot of people more flexible with work, it's actually not as bad traffic than pre-COVID versus New York can still be pretty hectic. Now let's talk about jobs. Now we're gonna talk about high level things. So New York is really known for 2 main sectors. While tech has grown more there, the city is still dominant when it comes to like finance and fashion, which are still really good industries. Now the Bay Area dwarfs New York when it comes to technology and biotech jobs. And a big part of the decision to choose one over the other industry is also going to be which industry you are in. Because if you want have a finance jobs, you're gonna have a lot more opportunity in New York than in San Francisco. Make no mistake, San Francisco will have some, but it just depends on where you are at with the industry that you want to participate in. Now, what about food? As I hinted a little bit earlier, you're gonna find everything you're looking for in terms of food and really in both cities. New York actually has more Michelin's restaurants, but a much larger area. The Bay Area has more Michelin restaurants per square mile than almost anywhere in the world. I love the convenience of the street vendors that New York has. Places like Halal Guys have taken almost every street corner for a reason. They're available all day and night, which is incredibly convenient. So really there's not much that compares to that, and it's open very, very late. It's a city that never sleeps. For San Francisco, for the most parts, most things will be pretty closed at around 2 o'clock. Now, food costs are actually somewhat comparable, and that's one of the cool things about New York and also the Bay Area. On one end, of course, you can spend a lot of money on high-end dining, whether it's on drinks, on food. But you can easily get by for $15 at a food court like Halal Guys, or $15 at a lot of these Asian restaurants, which are fantastic still. So the reality is you can get by with a lot less if you are actually looking for those options. Now let's talk about real estate and cost of living. So there were a few years where rentals were more expensive in San Francisco than New York, but that was really short-lived. New York is the most expensive place to rent in the country again, as it has been for most of the last few decades. So it's really interesting to see this, as there's never a shortage though of new skyscrapers being built in New York. However, if you actually look at the numbers, New York real estate has not done that well over an extended period of time. Now the numbers are a little bit more convoluted because they're not going to share that with you a lot because they kept it so secretive. Now, let's talk about housing though. Most of the starter homes in New York tend to be condos and co-ops. There's a whole lot more co-ops in New York than there are in any other place in the country. And many of these monthly HOA fees can get quite expensive depending on what the amenities are. A lot of units are older, but you're gonna see a lot of new developments continue to spring up. There's no shortage of places being torn down and new towers being built. But let's talk about it. The average cost of a home in San Francisco is about $1.38 million versus New York is about $1.11. Now, to be fair though, the average price takes into account more condos and co-ops in New York because there's a lot more of those versus San Francisco. That's relevant in the downtown area, but a lot of other areas tend to be more single family. So you're actually gonna get more square footage in the Bay Area, and your HOAs, even for apartments, tend to be less than those in New York. Now, taxes. Both states have some of the highest income taxes in the country. Now, New York State's highest income tax is about 10.9%. Now, there is a wealth tax that New York City residents have to pay, plus the city's top rate, which is about 3.876%. So as a top earner, we're talking about if you're making like a lot of money, 25 million a year, you're paying close to 15% to the city and state. So hence why there's a lot of people that have been migrating to Florida for that reason, especially if you have flexibility. Here's a breakdown of taxes for all incomes in New York. Now, what about California? California state income taxes for income above $625,000 is going to be that top bracket at 12.3%. Here is the breakdown that you can see for yourself as to what people can expect to be paying depending on where your income is at. But high level, they're actually fairly similar than anything else. Now, the question is, which area has a higher average salary to take advantage of? In New York, they do a lot of things differently of their compensation. So for example, those working in finance can make a lot of money, but what happens is that they're getting paid a lot more bonuses. So their compensation is very different. It's a bonus structure. Versus in tech, you have some that are bonus, but a lot more is driven by RSUs, which is stock in the company itself, which is then publicly traded, or it may be private, and there's an upside. So it's a really interesting comparison of their compensation. Now, yes, there will be some that will be one over the other, and some companies will do one over the other, but generally there's a different way of how they are incentivizing their staff members. Let's talk about the weather. The Bay Area and New York have very different environments. If you like to experience and enjoy the four seasons, then New York is certainly a place to be. You're gonna get some incredible spring and fall weathers with wonderful colors. But this will be interrupted by actual winters. Storms, snow, ice, wind, extremely cold. Now, some people feel like they get tired of that, others don't mind it. On the other end, you have summer times, which are humid and sweaty. Now, the Bay Area, it's mild across. Now, we're right now, when it's just being shot in the winter time, it's very, very cold for me. It's like 50 degrees, and that's considered as low as it gets. And usually it's about up to like roughly on average 80 degrees. Now, of course, it can go higher, but generally it's that kind of range. So really a light breeze, no humidity, definitely no snow. Rarely once in a year ice, less rain than normal, but really sunny almost all year round. How about entertainment and lifestyle? Now, this is some of the most important things for many when I think about the comparisons of the two. And it really depends on your age, your marital status, and just where you're at with your life. There is by far more to do in New York. It's really the city that never sleeps after all. So if you value the convenience of having restaurants on every corner and just like that kind of atmosphere, that city life, then by far New York City is going to be for you. Now, whether you outgrow that or not, that's a different story. Central Park, that's one of the most incredible public parks in the world. Every time I go there, I'm always astonished as to this being even there. And I like to go there all the time for a walk, go biking around, as it's just really, really special to see at this concrete jungle, because I've been to a lot of concrete jungles all over the world, but this is even there. Now, what's the downside of this kind of environment? It can be overwhelming and is quite frankly very loud. A lot of people in New York are used to that, so you're gonna hear sirens all the time. And it's also a little bit more inconvenient for some of these outdoor activities. But if you wanna play sports like tennis and golf, way more difficult to participate in because there's just so many more people in a smaller area. So this is why a lot of people may live in New York in their adventurous years, but eventually as they settle down, it may not be the place for them. So we see a lot of people from New York come after that, but it is your choice. Some move all through the suburbs if they want to be nearby. Now, what about other entertainment? From having top shows, New York does have Broadway, the original MoMA, and arguably the most vibrant culture in the world. San Francisco certainly has a smaller version, but really it's a far cry from what New York has just because of there's so many more options. Now, New York has a population of around 8.5 million people. people over its 468 square miles, which is around 30,000 people per square mile. The Bay Area has a population around 8 million over about 7,000 square miles, which is around 1,100 people per square mile. So you can see just the density is very different. Now, of course, Manhattan is way more dense than other metros, but in general, it's still a pretty packed place, and that's not uncommon to say. Now, what's also important is on the dating scene. I will say the male to female ratio is also very different between these areas. New York has a lot more females versus males, and it could be the industries, it could be the culture, there's all sorts of different reasons. While the Bay Area has significantly more male to female ratios, mainly due to a lot of the jobs from all around the world are in tech and especially in engineering. It's still always funny to me as people move from one to another and complain about the other side. Based off of all these variables, which would you pick and why? I'm sure I'm gonna get a lot of angry comments, so that's exactly why I did this video. So I wanna hear from you. Did I miss anything? Was this pretty accurate if you're looking at the general metro and you weren't trying to be objective of one or the other? If you're looking to buy, sell, or invest in the Bay Area or considering New York, please get in touch with me at 408-547-4590. I'd be happy to chat about your options. I have great realtors and connections out in New York and all the major cities where people would likely want to move to. Thanks for watching. See you next time.